Welcome back, everybody, to Pushing Buttons Podcast. This is Kyle.
I'm Robert.
I'm Kevin.
And this is the podcast where we express our ideas, opinions, concepts, and experiences. Today, we are continuing our discussion from last week, where we kind of dived into our favorite protagonists and why we enjoy controlling them so much. And this week, we're actually going to visit the other side of the spectrum, and we're going to take a look at the antagonist's point of view.
Bad guys.
And I think to kick things off, Kevin, you had a couple of places you wanted to touch off from?
I was just making sure I was allowed to talk.
You are.
I can talk now.
You can speak.
Okay.
This is a safe zone.
You are the antagonist.
Sometimes. Ouch. Also awesome.
I meant protagonist.
But you didn't say that, so you didn't mean that. He hung his head in shame. Before we get on that topic, does anybody want to talk about anything from the last week? Anybody do anything fun, exciting?
I am excited about a game I started playing. We've talked about this developer a lot before and their games, but it's a style of game that I had tried once and I thought I didn't care for, and I never got very far. But it's a Telltale game. I started The Wolf Among Us.
Nice.
And I
That's
got
pretty
through the first two episodes, and I think I started the third one over the weekend. And I love it. Cool. Like, I remember the only experience I had before with one of their games was the first Walking Dead that they did. And I only played it for maybe a couple hours. And I remember not caring for it too much back then.
Do you have any history reading the Fables graphic
I don't,
novels?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
It's making me want to. They're one of those ones that have always kind of been...
Well, you are in for a treat when we stream from my house, because we have the entire series
Nice.
in issue by issue. Mariah collected them when she was younger.
Nice. That is
So we
awesome.
have the whole series for you to peruse.
I would love to dive into that.
Yes.
Would you peruse or would you dive?
Why can't it be both? You
Peruse.
dive first, and then you peruse.
Okay. I get it.
But, yeah, I love because I don't know the source material that much, but I love everything I'm learning so far, and I understand it's like a prequel to the main comic series.
Okay. I probably knew that at one point, but forgot it since.
Yeah. And but I like the characters, and I'm really enjoying I think why I didn't care for him when I tried The Walking Dead way back then is because in that period of my life I was into like Halo and Gears of War and all that stuff, so it was fast-paced and that kind of thing. And these are definitely more story, character-driven, and, like kind of how last week I was talking about how I love thematic games now, and games that feel like movies, and so now this is kind of filling that role.
I thought you said the Madden
Me
games.
too. I was like, what?
The Madden. Thematic. Sorry.
No, I understand.
Thematic.
But, yeah, so I love that a lot, and I was really excited that I found it, and I love it, and now I can't wait to try the rest of their games. Not all of them excite me, but I definitely am excited for their games now. That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I still need to play the Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy ones. And, of course, Walking Dead when that comes out.
I hear the Guardians ones, and this is hearsay. I haven't played them, but I hear they're passable. You don't need to play them.
Yeah, I heard that particular one wasn't great. But...
By the way, if there's a bunch of changing in the audio levels, I am testing stuff out on a new laptop right now, so sorry.
So far, so good, right?
Yeah, we sound great, right, guys?
Absolutely. On that note, I did something exciting yesterday. I bought a new laptop for the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. It's got a better video card than my desktop does, so for a PC gamer, that kind of hurts that I didn't have that great of a video card to begin with in my desktop, but this laptop wasn't that expensive, and the construction of it's a little iffy, but I'm liking it so far, and I think I can do all of the editing and everything. It's super exciting to me that I can do it all from this laptop. I just got to make sure I can still install the software and my licenses carry over and everything.
Hopefully help us to be able to provide more content, too.
That's the exact idea.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Can take it on the road.
And was there anything else that you would like to share as well for your week previously?
Previously on Kevin's week. No.
No games? Nothing really free time wise?
No.
Okay then. Moving on to me, I guess.
I spent a lot of time with. I did a lot of artwork for the podcast, and now I'm going to delete it all because
we gotta talk about that. We got a new logo.
Yeah, and it's going away because my brother made another new one,
and
it's so much better.
It's going to be so hype.
Yeah, woo, hype.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. It actually makes us look a little bit more professional than we act. So we're going to be up in more places pretty soon too, and I'm excited about that. That's what I've been spending a lot of my time on, a lot of my money on, is trying to get pushing buttons to where we need it to be. And it's exciting.
It's how we start. The logo comes first. You get a good logo, and then you have to get better.
And then you get on iTunes.
Yeah.
You get the logo, and then you're on iTunes.
Like, all right, we got a good logo. We have to get better now.
We got to live up to that logo.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle. What have you been doing this last week?
Well, nothing new really. I played some more Final Fantasy XIV, and basically, I started playing the Heaven's Ward expansion, and really enjoyed it so far. The story is a lot more grounded than the original Realm Reborn. I would say it's a lot more exciting to see the next quest for the main story. So I've been really diving into that this past week.
Cool.
Aside from that, I've been playing more Assassin's Creed Origins. I just completed all the quests in Giza and Memphis. So I'm basically everything down from Alexandria in like a backwards C shape I've done. So right now I'm about level 30. I'm really enjoying the game right now. Just the different weapons and their variety and how they're used in combat, as well as the adrenaline skills, I think they're called, when you tap the shoulder buttons together. I've been really enjoying the branching combat. Like, it feels like it's opening up now.
The thing that I really like the most about the combat in that game is that with those overpower attacks or the charge attacks, that depending on the type of weapon you have equipped, it's a different type of attack that you build up to. So you can have like the one swipe, or you can go in berserk mode, or whatever it is, depending on the weapon that you have equipped at that time. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so far a highlight of mine is when you investigate like a bandit camp or something, and you have to kill the commander or captain of that camp. I just had a giant war axe, and I used my adrenaline ability to kind of split his skull in two in one hit, and I was like, damn, that was awesome. So the game's getting really fun.
It's got some satisfying feeling to it.
It does, yeah. And I really enjoyed climbing the pyramids and seeing the landscape from the top of them. Other than that, I've been watching a lot of the Summer Games Done Quick marathon on Twitch.
Yeah.
Haven't really had a lot of time to scope out a lot of the runs that are being done, but I did catch Prey yesterday, and that was really fun to watch. I especially like the exploit where basically they can clip through the doors by using the glue gun. So I'm going to do that in every playthrough now.
I'm very glad that I didn't watch that, being that I'm like 6.5, 7 hours into the game, also known as 10% into the story, and I don't want any spoilers.
Yeah, you won't get any from me, but
no, I know.
I'm looking forward to seeing the conclusion of the marathon this weekend.
Games Done Quick is not only a really great cause, but it's always fun to see. A lot of times they have the same games over and over again every year.
They tend to, yeah.
But I think at this point people are expecting to see Metroid, or people are expecting to see
Mario.
The Mario games, and yeah.
Which was last night. That was really fun to watch too. But that's really it for my week.
Nice.
Nothing new really, just more of the same.
Yeah.
But loving it.
Yeah. At some point we're going to start streaming on Twitch. We officially do have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/pushingbuttons. And I actually put a video on the YouTube channel of me talking about that, me looking at, I should say, reviewing the Jedi Outcast lightsaber mod that I did back in 2002 that we talked about on the last episode of Pushing Buttons. So some stuff going on with 3 of us working full-time jobs. It's coming actually a lot more than I thought it would. So it's good. It's fun.
Definitely check out that video because some of the comments at the end are gold.
They're worth the wait.
I thought so too. I'm glad you enjoyed those, guys.
Definitely.
All right, well, to kick things off, I'm kind of going to go with the same sort of pattern that we went with last week. We started talking about most of the iconic protagonists, namely a lot of the Nintendo ones, because they have the best well-known characters that you expect to see in every game in that franchise. So going to do the same thing with the antagonists, and whether or not they actually stand out as antagonists or if they just stand out as characters. Like, to me, Bowser is just a character that has to be in a Mario game.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be the big baddie. He doesn't have to be the antagonist of the story for me to buy into it. I think that's kind of the case with most of these, the classic ones. When you're talking about Ganon, Ganon is always the bad guy, the villain, isn't he?
He is, yeah, for the most
or
part.
some form of Ganon.
Yeah, there's been a game or two where that's not the case, but they're
Really?
mostly
Okay.
spin-off titles.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like with Mario as well.
Gotcha.
I'm sure there's a spin-off game of Mario that...
Like Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah.
Those
Basically.
type of games. Or
Yeah.
Mario Tennis.
Well, I was actually referring to Super Mario Brothers 2, where it was like not even actually a Mario game.
Yeah, that was definitely not a Mario game.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of that game. The original version. Anyway, that's feeling pretty good, guys.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, those kinds of characters don't really stand out to me as antagonists. They just stand out as characters. But does that negate their presence? Does that make their presence any less meaningful to you guys?
For me, no, not really. I mean, the game series that I'm mostly familiar with, where there's a recurring villain, is Zelda and Mario. And, you know, it's always great to see what new form they're shown in. Like for Ganon, he's always different
Yeah.
with each Zelda game.
Yeah.
And what I like about the Zelda games is, you know, he's like the main villain, but you'll have side villains as well.
Yeah.
And, like, for example, in Twilight Princess, you fight, I think his name was Zant. He was the first side villain before you reach Ganon at the end of the game. And I think from there, Mario and Bowser, I don't necessarily enjoy fighting Bowser, but I enjoy him as a character, like you were saying, Kevin. Like, he's always a great antagonist because he always does the same thing every time. We hate him for it.
Right.
But, you know, at the same time, it's like, how many times can you fight Bowser over and over?
It's the same with Sonic the Hedgehog. How many times can you fight Dr. Robotnik?
Yeah.
Sorry, Dr. Eggman, and expect something different out of it? It's the same thing over and over again, which is the definition of insanity. Which Voss from Far Cry
Nice
3.
segue.
Thank you. I was working on that for an
That is a
entire
great
2.5
villain.
seconds. Voss from Far Cry 3 is actually one of my favorite villains that didn't get his due.
Yeah, mine as well.
It was
Me
really
as well.
I don't like the story from Far Cry games. I never have. Far Cry 3 stood out to me just because of that character. And then that drug-fueled sequence that you kill him, I was like, no, that can't be it. That can't be it.
No, I can't. No.
But it was. And it was sad. I know a lot of people bring him up as a villain that didn't last as long as that he should have in the game. And it's because it's absolutely true. He was well written. There was actual, I don't know if it's progression so much as it was like progression relating to the protagonist, the douchebag from, you know, Richville, America. I don't know where they were from, but
Jason Brody.
That's it.
How's
remember
for
that.
Yeah, rich kid name.
good memory there, I suppose.
Well, I did start playing that game, like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
That's right. You
for
played
like
the classic edition.
half hour, so.
That's right. I honestly can't remember any of the Far Cry antagonists outside of the one that's on the cover of Far Cry 4.
Pagan Min.
And I didn't remember his name. I just remember his pinkish, purplish jacket that he's wearing on the cover.
Yeah.
That's all I remember.
He was... I was going to say, Voss was going to be on towards the top of my villains, too. And it's been so long since I played that game, like all the way through, I totally forgot that he kind of bit it.
Yeah.
Like, what was that, about halfway through the game? A little more than that?
50 to 65% of the way through the
and
story.
then it was
somewhere
like
in there.
the cult lady or whatever after that. But
His sister, I think. Voss's sister.
I don't remember.
I think it was his sister.
But Pagan Min, he was definitely not as good as Voss, but I enjoyed him as a villain a lot. I think the voice acting had a lot to do with it. It was the guy that voiced Joel from The Last of Us and a bunch of other characters. I can't remember his name, but he infused life into the character even if he wasn't written the greatest way. But I did enjoy it as a villain, him as a villain throughout the whole game, and the ending kind of... I enjoyed the ending of that game a lot. I don't want to spoil it because I know you haven't played it. I don't know if you ever are going to play it.
Far Cry 4?
Yeah.
I've never played it.
I'm going to.
I don't want to spoil it, but I liked how they wrapped up his story, I guess, at the end of it. The story of him and your protagonist, it's connected, and I like how they connected that. A lot of people, didn't think he was that great, but...
This is people like me, even, for the most part, don't care about a Far Cry story. They want it for the open world, crazy gunplay.
Exactly.
And the Splinter Cell-esque stealthing through camps, or the whatever, going through the camp and eliminating everybody.
I was going to ask you, Kevin, do you remember the Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon villain? Because I don't. At all.
Oh my god, I do not.
I mean, I love that game so much, but I can't remember the villain at all.
I can't remember either.
That's not a good sign.
There are a lot of games that just have
forgettable villains.
Very forgettable villains. So what, in your opinion, makes a memorable villain? What makes the villain something that you either just want to loathe or that you just want to finish the game to see the end of because of the way that he or she is and acts?
I mean, for me, when I think of open world games, I can't remember a single villain from them.
It's because those games are made to be played as an open world game, not a story driven game, and that's why I'm sick of open world games.
Yeah, it's getting tiresome. Absolutely.
It's all in the writing. I mean, you can have the flashiest looking villain or the spouting the craziest phrases and stuff, but if they're not written well, and if they're not a good enough, I guess, foil for your protagonist, then they're just going to be forgettable. And I think that's why Voss worked so well, because he was written really well, even if he didn't last long.
See, what I liked about Voss was that he actually was able to get me more into the environment, like into the setting of the game, because he was a product of that environment, and the way he thought and the way he acted, what he did was because of the way that environment was. And it was the perfect way to wrap the characters and the setting into one story that was digestible, but then killing him off as quickly as they did as the main villain, not turning him into the main villain, was a shame.
I did want to mention that ever since then, it seems like the Far Cry games have gone out of their way to try to craft the next big villain because they felt like they did it so well.
It's like when Fox canceled Arrested Development and then made that cartoon Sit Down, Shut Up. In the trailer for that cartoon, they actually they were listing off the names of the actors that were in that show, and then they said at the end of it, "We're sorry about Arrested Development."
Really?
But it was before Netflix picked them up, obviously.
Yeah.
It's like, we're sorry that we killed Voss off, so here's this guy.
Yeah, they do write villains. They actually attempt to write them, whether it lands or not. Like with 5. You have Joseph Seed, the main one, then his 2 brothers and a sister. And you can tell that they are definitely trying to write these interesting, this character is all weird and does this and stuff. And supposed to have that connection with the protagonist, but they haven't captured it as well since 3.
To not spend too much time on Ubisoft, the Assassin's Creed villains, even though most of them are like historical figures or some twisted version of a historical figure, do they resonate with you? Because they do not with me
completely
whatsoever.
Forgettable.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't. The only one I could remember was, because I was thinking about this earlier, was Rodrigo Borgia from 2.
From 2, yep.
He became the Pope at the end, so that's
right.
memorable, but
a little
honestly,
bit,
it's... Or, I guess, Hatham from 3. Because he was the character's father.
Gosh,
but
right.
it's other than that, I can't remember Black Flag's villain. Can't remember
This is terrible.
Syndicate's villain.
I don't either. I mean, the only one that really sticks out would be...
1.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say Assassin's Creed 3 with Charles. You know, the main villain of that game.
Charles.
He's like the last guy you assassinate.
Oh, I never played that game.
I just remember it because Connor's always going like, Charles!
Yeah. See, I forgot about Charles. I was only thinking about Hatham.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Assassin's Creed, the original, actually did pretty good. I will never remember the mentor's name. But having him as the main boss of the game, as the ending boss fight of the game, it wasn't unexpected, but it was a good way to spin the whole story full circle. Mm-hmm. It was a great way to tie it up, and it wasn't that memorable, but it was more so than any of the other Assassin's Creed games since then. I wonder if The Crew 2 has a villain.
More than likely.
DLC.
Oil changes.
DLC. You know, I was honestly picking my brain to try and remember anything, and what I love about the Metal Gear Solid series is that it has memorable boss fights and memorable villains that you face.
I've heard that.
I mean, every single villain I still remember off the top of my head because they're so well written. I think it has a lot to do with how they're written.
As somebody who's only ever played Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1, I have to say that Psycho Mantis is probably one of the best villains in a video game franchise ever. Simply for the fact that he knew what you were going to do. He. That he knew what you were going to do before you did it and was able to block everything until you unplugged your controller and put it in player number 2's input. And then he couldn't read your mind anymore because he had that connection. It was just a brilliant little thing that made that game so
that
great.
Really cool.
At the time, it was incredible.
I never knew that.
And like when you play it for the first time as a little kid, and that happens, you're like, "What the?"
When he says, "Oh, I see you played such and such game because you have other Konami save game data on your memory card."
Oh, you like to play Castlevania?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, you never see that kind of stuff happening in games anymore. That's why
really cool.
It was awesome.
I remember like Revolver Ocelot. I remember Liquid Snake, but it's not like I remember anything that they said or did. I just remember them because they were at this point they're more iconic than anything else.
Well, they were so like outlandish and expressive.
Yes,
like they made a point to make you remember them.
Xenia in GoldenEye.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she was based on the character from the movie, but in that game, I still remember that fight in the jungle because it was a little difficult, but it was just it made you change your entire tactics and how you fought that boss in the game because you couldn't just like run in a circle and kill and shoot like you could with every other boss in the game. It was like random fire coming at you from the trees and stuff. I didn't think about that ahead of time. I just thought about that.
You know, it's great that you bring that up because as a kid, I'd never watched GoldenEye before playing the game.
See, I played the game, I played the game way before I saw the movie.
And I was so surprised when 006...
Trevelyan?
Yeah, Trevelyan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I remember him. I don't remember his 006, but I know in the movie he's that, basically.
Alec Trevelyan, Sean Bean.
I was so shocked by his betrayal. I was like, no!
That's 2 Eddard Stark?
Yeah, and then I watched the movie later. I'm like, okay, that's awesome.
It's funny when there's a game that's based on a movie, and that's another topic for another time. That that you play the game before you see the movie, and it spoils the movie for you. But you don't care because if you saw the movie, it would have spoiled the game for you, and that's when you're like, son of a gun! I wish I hadn't seen that.
I know. For me personally, like for a villain to be relatable, they have to discuss like a lot of heavy themes that make you sympathetic to their cause.
I don't even think it has to be heavy. I think it has to be something relatable.
I mean, there are a lot of games where you have a villain and their motives are not clear from the onset, but as you learn more about them through, playing the game, you start to see where they're coming from, and that, I think, makes for a very compelling antagonist. The only one I can really think of off the top of my head was Solidus Snake in Metal Gear Solid 2. Basically, he's trying to free America from the control of this entity called the Patriots. And they're controlling all of this flow of information, controlling how people consume information. And he's trying to get rid of their influence on the world. And, you know, at the time when I played it, I'm like, what the fuck is even happening in this game? Because it was so nuts.
Kyle's not censoring himself.
No, not at all.
But, you know, as I've grown older and I rewatched those cutscenes later, I'm like, my God, what a well-written antagonist.
Right.
I almost see him as a protagonist because of how awesome he is.
Yeah.
You need to play those games. Oh, God.
One of my favorite
I'm preaching to myself.
One of my favorite TV show villains, at least of a show that's still kind of currently going, is he's not like a main villain, but Tywin Lannister.
Yeah.
And it's not only just because the actor is great at playing the role. It's not just because of the writing and his dialogue. Everything that he says in the show is perfect. It's because he has that clear motive of trying to do everything he can to make that Lannister name better. He has that motive of just everything he does for his family. And that's something that anybody can relate to. I don't have kids, but I know that if I were to have kids, anything that I do, I want it to be for them.
Naturally.
Yeah. I think that's such a relatable thing, and that's the thing that's missing in a lot of video games. And I granted, I don't play a whole lot of games, but I'm sure there are others out there.
Yeah, I guess I would like to point out that Thanos is a great example of a villain, a relatable villain, at least to me. Maybe not to everybody, but, you know, I agree with his policy of, you know, maybe half of the people need to die.
He's just trying to push your buttons, folks.
Right? No, not really. But the movie did such a great job of helping you to see things from his perspective. And yes, he's doing all these horrible things, but he has a clear motive for it. And it's something that, if it wasn't so horrible, could be, you know, very relatable to how a lot of people feel. And I really wish there was more villains like that in video games, at least ones that I play. I'm sure there are, but, you know, I think it needs to be more mainstream, having well-written villains like that.
Gotcha. You know, just on an unrelated note, like, I see a lot of people complaining, like, why didn't he use the Infinity Gauntlet to provide enough resources for me? And I'm like, that's not who Thanos is.
Because people suck.
I mean, it makes total sense what he did. I'm with you on that.
Hey, we can start a movie podcast at some point, but for right now, this is a video game podcast, and I'm sorry I brought up Game of Thrones. I'll stop it. But on the topic of professional wrestling, the storylines that I get into there are when the heel is written and motivated based on something that is relatable, not just wanting to be a dick to everybody. So I get what I was saying.
And there's enjoyable stories where I enjoy just having a bad guy just for bad guy's sake, where I want to kill everybody or destroy everything, like General Rom from the first Gears of War. And you see him, I think, 2 times in the game with no interaction until the very last level when you actually fight him. But there's some games like that where it's okay just to have, you know, for me to just have a villain that's just there for me to beat.
Who's just a total douchebag that you need to kill because he's such a dick.
Yeah.
See, those kinds of antagonists don't really get to me as much, like Ares in God of War. That entire story was leading up to Kratos killing Ares. And it was because he wanted to get revenge on everything that Ares did to him. And that I didn't really care. That didn't relate to me so much.
I mean, I was thinking of Darth Malak from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the first one. Like, that guy was pretty evil.
Yeah.
And he was such a great villain. And a good foil for Darth Revan.
He was the perfect foil for Revan, because if you haven't played this game by now, and we spoiled a lot for you last week, then sorry, spoilers ahead. But yeah, you're playing as Darth Revan the whole time and you don't know it. And you have a history with this guy that you don't know that he does. Mm-hmm. And it does set it up perfectly to that end point of the game where after you've had the revelation that you are a Revan, that that you have this history with him, and this is why he's doing that. And yeah,
I mean, that to me makes a really good villain. Like, you can have the villains you can relate to, but you can also have the villains who are just so scummy. Like, it makes you, like, ecstatic to beat them.
Are there any other? I was trying to actually think of examples of villains like that. Villains that are just dicks because they want to be dicks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of them.
It's
I
Halo
mean-
games.
Diablo, I suppose.
And they got Tartarus from Halo 2.
Tartar sauce?
Yeah.
There's-
That's what I used to
there's
call
like-
him, Tartarus.
I've never
He
played
was
Halo 2.
the brute, like the big brute captain guy.
Oh, that was Halo 2, wasn't it?
That's what he said, yeah.
That's right.
That's what I said. But yeah, and he a villain like that
That's
where
the perfect Tobias.
I see. It's been so long since I played it. I don't remember if he had any extra motivations, but just the whole game, he's trying to capture you or kill you or whatever, and then But he was a fun villain to try to beat and take down because he's like such a douchebag. So, like, going back to the thing, I said there are some games where it's okay just to have a mindless villain.
I always think of 343 Guilty Spark as the main villain of the Halo series. Because he's caused so much for being a little android that likes to just create chaos out of all the Halo rings being set off. And I mean,
That's a valid point.
I can't remember now because it's been so long, but I feel like he was killed in Halo 3, right?
I don't remember either,
I honestly don't remember. I mean, it's so long ago. But I do remember him always being this little piece of shit that was always taunting you for, why are you doing this? And it's like...
Yeah. In the first Halo game, you start out thinking he's, one of the good guys. And then he's going to help you. And then, I like it when they flip things on you. Like BioShock. With Atlas.
Yeah.
The whole game and then that twist. I think that was a great example of turning something you thought into something different, and then you have this antagonist out of it.
Subverting your expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here is a discussion that I kind of wanted to save for another time, but I think it'll fit in here. Star Child.
Say what?
Star Child.
Are you talking about Mass Effect again?
I'm talking about Mass Effect again.
I don't recall that phrase.
Star Child. He was the kid.
Is there another beer around
The kid
here?
in Mass Effect 3.
See,
No,
I don't remember Mass Effect 3 at all, so...
The ending of it? You don't remember the ending of Mass Effect 3? I don't want to bring back bad memories, but...
I remember the endings, but I don't remember a Star Child.
He was the kid that was explaining that he was the one sending the Reapers out and resetting
I vaguely
everything
remember
over and
that.
over and over again. Was that not the worst shoehorned villain,
Yeah.
using air quotes here, of all time?
God, after the amazing villain we had in Mass Effect 1 was Saren.
Saren was so good.
He was a great villain that I actually sympathized with a lot when he...
And you're meant to.
Yeah.
Especially if you read the novel and see his backstory and know that he's gone through a lot of the same stuff as Captain Anderson and his Commander Shepard going through.
I mean, just to see that progression of awesomeness down to terribleness. Because Mass Effect 2's villain was a giant Terminator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no real villain.
I
in
think
Mass
you're
Effect
supposed
2.
to be thinking of the elusive man as the villain, even though
I
he's
don't
not
see that,
portrayed
though.
as the villain.
I mean, I get
At least
that,
not till
but-
the third one, if I remember right.
Kind of, yeah. And because he was indoctrinated.
Yeah.
But
I remember him being, I loved his character. And
I love the actor that voiced
Martin
the
Sheen
character.
did a fantastic job. But yeah, it's... Other than Saren, there hasn't been too many memorable villains for the Mass Effect franchise. Even Andromeda, which I just played last year, I can't remember there being an overarching...
It was the dude that was in charge of that alien race.
Okay. That one dude with the one alien race.
Yeah.
The pink ones? I haven't played the game, so I don't know.
I don't know. They looked like typical Star Trek aliens.
Oh, okay.
Like Next Generation style. Like they ran out of ideas. we're gonna have a long discussion on Mass Effect at some point. I just wanted to bring it up to. I loved Saren.
Mm-hmm.
Great villain. It also like embraced like the gameplay behind it, because your main interactions with Saren are through dialogue, and that's what the game was trying to pretty much convey with its release at the time. Like, the dialogue system was so expansive for that genre. I mean, you'd really only have seen that with, Fallout 1 and 2 and other games like it. But in an action RPG, that was pretty much unheard of back then.
Yeah.
And to have the main villain...
Especially in a sci-fi shooter.
Exactly. And, back in 2007 when that was released, like, just having the dialogue conversation wheel to interact with the villain. I mean, there is a final boss fight where you shoot and stuff, but
I don't want to talk about that boss fight.
Yeah.
When he turns into a creepy spider, Saren.
Yeah.
Jumpy robot spider.
Yeah.
I don't remember those moments for a villain. I just remember the interaction through dialogue.
Yeah.
More so than anything else.
Yeah. The when you first see him as the player, when he's on when you're on Eden Prime, and he shoots the other Spectre Turian in the back of the head, and how he just does not care. You can see that, but knowing the backstory to him and the lead up to it's so good. Did Dragon Age Origins have a villain before the expansion? Because I know the Darkspawn were like the thing you are trying to stop. Was there like one big Darkspawn dude that was the main Darkspawn dude before the expansion? I forget what the expansion was called.
Considering I couldn't even remember who the Grey Wardens were for my trivia question, I honestly would be hard-pressed to find you an answer.
Maybe I know, since I knew the Grey Wardens and I'd never played the game.
Exactly.
No, I don't know.
Praise Roberts.
Dragon Age was a different game, though, altogether. For me, that was more about the side stories, the side missions, and exploring and leveling up than it was about the main Darkspawn mission.
Again, open world game. So.
Yeah.
I mean...
No, that one wasn't open world.
It wasn't?
No, not really. Did I say open world?
I think I did.
Oh, okay.
I
just assumed it was all this time.
No, it has like locations you can go to, but it's not open world.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to remember the guy's name from Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, because he was the final boss of Inquisition. But I never played Dragon Age 2, so I don't know his motives really well. Is it like Corinthius or something?
That sounds like a book from the Bible.
It was Corinne something.
I don't know. I don't remember.
But I thought he was a pretty bland villain.
Dragon Age 2 is a game that I never want to play again. Never want to remember. And Dragon Age Inquisition, I never finished.
Oh. You're not missing much.
Yeah.
So what about whole, like, enemy types or enemy factions as antagonists? These are some games like the aforementioned Halo games where there's not always one specific villain for a game. Sometimes it's, the entire Covenant or the Flood or whatever.
Sometimes it can be good, but sometimes you can end up with the Queen of the Borg from Star Trek. And it's like the Borg are these...
I know who the Borg are.
They're seen as people that are cyborgs that are undefeatable, and you're not supposed to be able to overcome them. But sometimes, somehow, Picard and crew always do. And then in the movie, First Contact, they had the Borg Queen.
They actually assimilate Picard, don't they?
They do that. That's in the TV show. That's in the Next
I
Generation.
just remember him having the eyepiece on.
He was Locutus of Borg. Yeah. When they do things like that and have like one mouthpiece for the entirety of the collective, or in that case the collective, but in like Gears of War having that one locust commanding officer or whatever it was, I don't remember Gears of War, or having a head Darkspawn or whatever it is. It just seems like it's tacked on, and they just do it to do it because they feel like they have to do it. It doesn't.
There must be a grandiose fight with the leader, and
right?
It's always bland and forgettable.
Right.
I feel like that tends to be more shooter-based games.
I don't even know if that's the case.
These are the ones I've experienced.
Yeah.
But
Well, I always go back to, when we talk about shooters, I always go back to Doom and is it the Mecha Demon?
Cyber Demon?
Cyber Demon, thank you. The Cyber Demon was this big, huge, badass mother from Mars and Hell kind of put together. And that's memorable, but at the same point, it's just another demon Martian. And a demon.
Yeah, you don't learn its childhood backstory. Or
Right. It's
what
just,
made him evil.
Pick your enemy to kill.
it's the next demon up in the food chain. I just remember it because of how hard they were to kill when I was a kid, first playing Doom 2. But they don't stand out as like a story-driven boss to me, obviously.
I feel like a lot of games take steps with building up a true antagonist, because you have these boss units that you stomp continuously, and then their leader is this guy and you have to kill him, and then he turned out to have 2 other leaders and you kill them.
So you've played Assassin's Creed,
basically. But a lot of games do that, especially open world games.
Yeah.
And
Ghost Recon Wildlands.
It's another Ubisoft open world game, so yeah.
I think of Mercenaries for that specifically. I don't know if you guys have played Mercenaries or not. Like
That's a blast from the past.
Like those kind of open world games, like Grand Theft Auto, where you have a big mission against this named character, and he turns out he was just a pawn of another character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's like a domino effect, and it keeps tumbling ever downward to mediocrity. But that's what I love about the Metal Gear Solid series so much, is they have these memorable boss fights, you know, combined with the gameplay mechanics that you have to exploit to achieve victory over these
it's some sort of
named foes.
There's a combination of pattern recognition, luck, and skill that all go together, plus knowing your enemy.
I mean, it says a lot that I still remember each and every boss fight from Dark Souls, and I can't remember a single one from Assassin's Creed or Grand Theft Auto, you know, open world bosses.
Well, a lot of those games that you're mentioning, and the reason we're even talking about it in the first place is because the antagonist is supposed to be the last fight of the game. It's the thing that's supposed to make you remember the game. Mm-hmm. And if it's not written right, if it's not done right, if it's not executed properly, you're not going to remember that game in a good light.
No.
And obviously a lot of these games that we don't remember the main villain of, they had a villain or an antagonist that was just kind of thrown in there, half-assed written.
I mean, I find a lot of games that have memorable villains, they're established really early in the game, and they are like the central focus for the story. Like the reason why your character is experiencing all of these plot elements as they come their way. Like, I know you guys don't play Final Fantasy games, but they have great villains, though. I mean, some of them are more convoluted than other ones, but I always remember Sephiroth because
everybody always brings up Sephiroth.
I mean, if you've played it, I mean, you already know that Eris dies. I mean, it is a huge moment in gaming history because it's the first time you've seen a villain just straight up kill one of your party members. And I have to talk about it at least a little bit. I didn't play Final Fantasy VII when it was first released, but I knew going into the game that happened.
Oh, okay.
But even when it happened, I was just completely, like, I just collapsed in myself. I was just like, oh my god. Like, I couldn't believe that happened. Even though I already knew it was going to happen. Like, it's moments like that that make a memorable villain. Central to the story, he actually affects those who you're close to in the game that kill one of your party members or something like that. I feel like if we're talking about the ultimate video game villains, you have to put him on there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But with a lot of these, other games that we play, it just feels like you're going through the motions of a generic villain, just for the sake of the story needing one.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I find myself looking back on all these open world games I played, like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption. I don't even remember Red Dead Redemption's villain.
I can remember Dutch Vanderland's name, but I can't remember his fight or anything, or even there even was one.
I mean, Dutch wasn't a bad character. It just feels like for most of the game, he's not even a factor in the story.
Most of those villains that are not memorable, it seems like they're the people that are writing them or developing the game or whatever, just checking off bullet points. Oh, the character needs to show up to make this impact on the player. The character needs need to have this cutscene here to show that this guy's being a dick to this guy. It's just bullet points. Mm-hmm. It's not a one cohesive, well-written story. And that cohesive, well-written story is what makes both the protagonist and the antagonist and the whole story and game work. Mm-hmm. It's just writing.
Basically, that's what it boils down to. I mean, you have a lot of retro games that have these villains that are so two-dimensional. It doesn't really feel like there's much to them.
Well, if you want to talk about a literal two-dimensional villain, I want to talk about the ghosts from Pac-Man. Each of those ghosts is programmed differently. They all have different scripts that make them chase Pac-Man differently. They are well-written antagonists in the arcade age. It can be done.
It can be, yes.
But then you have I like Sonic the Hedgehog a lot, but then you have Dr. Robotnik that's just there turning animals into robots because he wants to power his death egg. And then he just, every time you defeat him, he's like all burning in flames and then just takes off and then laughing at you at the next level. There's no, why do I care? Why do you care? And the other villains that we talked about that actually have some kind of backstory with the main character, some motivation that's relatable to the player is what makes the villain.
Yeah. I just have to say, like, there's so many of these memorable experiences in gaming that are tied to your protagonist. But with the antagonist, it's really, really hard to cherry pick. They're just so far few in between, each of them. I honestly, it's really difficult to try and pull out separate moments.
None of us came in here prepared to talk about this because there were not enough great villains to write down a list.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
You can look it up on YouTube and see people doing lists of great villains.
Yeah, like top 5 boss fights. I mean,
right.
You remember boss fights,
right? And boss fights are different from having a well done antagonist.
It's just so rare to have a memorable villain. I mean, we've seen it in movies a lot, and TV shows even, but for video games, I think it's still very underdeveloped.
It really is. Most of the villains that come out in games now, and I'm thinking a lot of Destiny 2 right now. Gaul, I think, is the guy's name. He's just being a dick. He just wants to be there to take the light. It isn't until the very end of the story of the main game that he kind of has that his motivations show a little bit, but it's still not to the point where it makes you care about. At least it didn't make me care about the game at all. I just wanted to play because it had fun shooting mechanics, and I like to jump. His character wasn't relatable until the very end. It was semi-relatable, but those villains just want to be mean. That's what it boils down to.
Well, you have that as well with a lot of
sorry, Robert.
It's okay.
third-person shooter games where you have developed villains. I'm not sure if you guys know of any at all.
Third-person shooter villains?
Yeah.
That kind of goes along with what I was just going to mention is how it doesn't always ruin the game experience. You can still have a great game without a great antagonist, and what comes to mind for me is the Uncharted series, where I can't really remember any of the villains specifically. I remember Uncharted 2 is Vizago, Vizier, something like that, a Russian guy, right?
Yeah.
I think it was like Razievek or something.
Zanzibar.
Zanzibar.
and those are fantastic games, and those games really are about the protagonist and his crew.
But that's also more about the side characters as well. Yeah, well,
exactly.
the crew. Yeah.
Like
about
side
Sully
characters
and
is what I
Ellen
was
and
meaning.
yeah.
And
Is that her
so
name?
you can have Elena.
Elena, thank you.
And so you can have those great game experiences and still not have, even though we would all love if the villains in those games were more memorable, there's still great games and they're not tainted by that fact.
That's actually kind of interesting because when I played Uncharted 3 for the first time, the villain was what actually ruined the game for me.
Really?
That was the one with the...
Talbot.
Remember the lady with the
It was the old
with
lady.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about her because she wasn't the real main villain. It was this random henchman of hers named Talbot who would teleport, and it was such a dumb premise for a villain. And
He
it just
teleported?
He would teleport, yeah.
I don't remember that at all.
And I didn't play Uncharted 3.
Well, basically what happens is you get hit with a drug, and he kind of looks like he's shifting, teleporting.
That's fantastic.
And even Drake's like, "What? How is he doing that?" And it's it's Uncharted. It's not like
That does sound familiar. I can hear that in his voice.
yeah.
How's he doing that?
What sort of trickery is this?
And then at the end, it's revealed that it was just some ancient drug that he shoots you with whenever he does that, and it's so stupid. It's a really dumb idea for a villain because the old lady was worthless. I completely forgot about her story because it was so pointless. But he's the real antagonist, and he just dies in the most miserable way for a villain to die. He just falls off a cliff. And it's just why do I care about my journey in this game? I mean, hooray, Drake is now engaged to Elena, woohoo! And you see that in Uncharted 4, and that actually had a pretty good villain, I thought.
I was trying to remember the villain from 4. I couldn't remember him either.
It's Crash Bandicoot.
That's right.
But at least for Uncharted 3, it was just terribly done. The story just felt like it was pieced together like a Frankenstein. They had these set pieces planned in pre-development of the game.
And then it goes back to the bullet points of you gotta hit this mark, hit that mark, hit that mark.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened with Uncharted 3.
Yeah. Well, going back to boss fights, do well done boss fights, hard boss fights that actually make you think and make you kind of stress out and work for that victory. Do those bosses mean anything to you guys?
Oh, absolutely.
As a villain in the game, not in the story. It doesn't have to be in the story, but in the game itself.
In the game itself, yes.
Okay.
Being perfectly honest, I don't care for boss fights. I would prefer most of my games not to have boss fights.
It's because I think you play a lot more shooters than other games, and shooter boss fights do not usually work out well as boss fights.
Nope.
In a strategy game or in an RPG of some kind or in more methodical combat system games, a boss fight can work out a lot better. And Dark Souls is the obvious example of that.
I guess that makes sense because Assassin's Creed, not Creeds, when they have, I guess, the boss or a bigger enemy, that is different than just a Gears of War boss. It's a bullet sponge, and you're just trying to hit the light up points to make them do this so you can get that weakness.
And there are games that do that very well, and games like Vanquish come to mind. Or
for me, it's Resident Evil 4.
Okay.
That game had fantastic villains for boss fights.
I even love playing House of the Dead in arcades. Games like that, and that's all they are. But I don't remember any of the boss fights. They're not memorable. They don't make the game for me. That's more about the mechanics. And if the game has mechanics to begin with, or even great shooting mechanics like Destiny 2, it doesn't make a memorable boss fight.
I was going to ask you, Kevin, do you remember any of the boss fights from Shovel Knight?
I remember King Knight, Mole Knight. If I sat here and thought about it without drinking beer beforehand for 30 seconds, I could probably list all of them. I mean, they are memorable because they have personality to them.
They have a thing that makes you remember them.
Each of their levels is themed around what they are and who they are, and so you're learning kind of about them as you're looking at the scenery of the level when you're playing through it. And at the end of it, even the way they talk, like King Knight, just the first boss that you fight in that game at the end of the first level, King Knight, the way that he talks is like, okay, this guy's regal. He thinks he's better than everybody else, and it just makes you want to hit him in the head with a shovel even more. That game is so well done. I cannot talk that game up enough. Yes, those boss fights are memorable because not only are their characters well written, the levels well done, but the boss fights themselves are all unique, different, and they test your skills. Not to the extent of Dark Souls, but they're not hard per se, but they're harder than the rest of the level.
Like when you look at the whole scope of the game, like you remember those moments specifically because of what it leads up to.
Yes.
And another example of that would be Undertale for me. But I'm not going to talk about that because you guys need to play it for yourselves.
I tried. I couldn't get into it.
You got to play it.
What style of game is it? Is it a side-scroller?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a retro game where you control a character and...
it's sort of one of those top-down RPGs. It's hard to describe without you playing it.
You can't put it in one genre. It's like a blend of genres.
Gotcha.
But the final boss, you have to experience it for yourself. You just have to do it.
Shovel Knight, though, kind of takes that the style of Mega Man, the way that Mega Man is written as a video game, but makes it good to the point where, I don't know, to me the villains of like the knights,
I see where you go.
The Order of No Quarter meant more to me than the robots that you fight in Mega Man.
I was gonna delve further into what you're talking about. Because with the Mega Man games, like I can never get into those, but I see what you're saying, like how the whole experience of finding each of those individual bosses in Shovel Knight is more memorable. Because you're saying how the level design kind of...
Mega Man does it to the same extent, though. To an extent.
Well, they do, but they don't have dialogue.
True.
At the end of
True.
the level and when you fight them. I think that's what Shovel Knight really did well, and why it sticks out more than Mega Man. When it comes to that theme, it basically develops these characters, well enough to give them their own expansions.
Well, yeah, not just that, but even to make the end of the game, because the whole story is about Shovel Knight and Shield Knight, and it says it right from the beginning, cinematic, and you think it's going to be just this cute 16-bit looking Mega Man-esque style game that you can play in 5 hours. You don't expect the story to stick with you, but the way that each of the bosses are written and the way that the story ties into the main villain of the game and to the beginning of the game it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Enchantress is a good antagonist in that game. The boss fight wasn't that great. At least the final boss fight of the game was pretty good, but when you're fighting the Enchantress, the time before that is not that great.
Mm. I want to say I do enjoy a boss fight when it's not just, like I said, a bullet sponge, when it's actually something that's not just where they have more health and are superpowered and stuff, when it's just regular villain, but you have to do certain things to defeat them. And the only example I could think of off the top of my head was The Last of Us, when I can't remember who the villain was in that game, but I remember the gameplay of when you take them down, and it's when you're in the town and it's snowing, it's like a blizzard outside, and you're playing as Ellie. Mm-hmm. So you're already kind of, you're underarmed and you're smaller and stuff, and then he's just chasing you around the inside of this building that's burning down.
Yeah.
And he's not like super powered or anything, but he can get you because he's obviously bigger than you, and it changes the gameplay. And when it's something like that, I guess I enjoy that, and I wish I had more games that had bosses like that than just generic, super powered bullet sponges.
Well, I think the main antagonist of The Last of Us is supposed to be your conscience. I think it's supposed to make you think about what you would do in that situation.
This is a great segue into the bosses of survival horror games. Because one series in particular, Silent Hill, does this so well. It makes the bosses that you experience and encounter, they're actually these figments of your personality, the protagonist's personality, that you have to triumph over in order to proceed in the story and learn what the hell is going on in this town. And specifically with Silent Hill 2, are you okay with me spoiling this game for you guys?
I don't care. I'm never going to play it.
basically, you learn that James is the reason why his wife died. And it turns out he was so distraught at providing care for his vegetative state-like wife that he actually kills her in her sleep by snuffing her out with a pillow. And because of that, he has these demons with him when he walks into Silent Hill. Everything from the enemy design to the boss encounters to the environments are a reflection of his personality and his trauma that he suffered when he just committed that unforgivable act. And survival horror games, that's what I love about them, is they explore the protagonist,
The human soul.
the human side of the protagonist, but at the same time, how that is basically conflicted. And
Those dark souls.
yep,
So there are a lot of things that make a great antagonist in a game. Whether it's memorable or not is kind of is subjective. Let us know what you think. There are a lot of ways to go on this, and we've had a lot of opinions on this, and we want to hear from you, even though Kyle's cracking up about it. If you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Twitter at PushingButtonsP. You can check out our website, pushingbuttonspodcast.com. Our YouTube channel link is on there. Our Twitch channel link is on there. Our Twitter's on there. SoundCloud will be on other places at some point.
Check out Kevin's Jedi Outcast video.
Yeah.
It's pretty entertaining.
Tell me what you think about that, too. Just leave a comment on the video. Let me know. I'll probably get back to you, especially if you're laughing at me, making fun of me. I'll enjoy it. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Pushing Buttons podcast, and we will see you next time.
Adios.
good night.
Love you.